8th of May, 1945, near Cuxhaven, Germany. Imagine being wrenched from sleep not by a polite knock, but by a brutal metallic roar, tank treads grinding against the cobblestones like iron teeth. English orders blared through a loud hailer shattered the morning stillness, unmistakable proof that the war had finally reached its end. And for the people inside that naval communications bunker, the message was mercilessly clear. Germany had lost. Greta Hoffmann pressed herself against the cold wall, her auxiliary uniform done up tightly to the neck, as if the buttons could offer protection from reality. Her fingertips were stained black with carbon, a silent testament to the night she had spent feeding classified typewriter ribbons into the flames of a small iron stove. Outside, British voices were barking surrender commands in strained, heavily accented German. Inside, fear clung to the shadows. 3 other women, a signals operator, a clerk, and a nurse who had only just escaped a field hospital as it fell, stood motionless, barely breathing. They all knew the rumors. Didn't everyone? What fate awaited German women when the enemy finally arrived? What horrors did victorious soldiers unleash? Ilse Bauer, that same nurse, had tended broken bodies in the Netherlands before retreating deeper into the Reich ahead of the Allied wave. Just 24, trained in a Protestant hospital in Stuttgart, she no longer entertained any illusions about the nobility of war. Yet the propaganda had drilled another fear into her bones. The British would grant no mercy. Posters and newsreels had shown their bomber crews, grinning while German cities burned beneath them. Tales of brutality spread like wildfire. The warning was unwavering. If they capture you, expect the worst. Anna Kessler, the signals operator, was the youngest, only 18. She came from a small village outside Bremen, daughter of a school teacher who loathed the Nazis, but had stayed silent to keep his family safe. Like so many others her age, she had joined because duty demanded it, because choice no longer meant anything. Petite, dark-haired and trembling, she looked as though the ground might swallow her whole. Then there was Marguerite Scholl, 31, once a clerk in a shipping office in Wilhelmshaven. Somewhere far away, in a Soviet POW camp or already buried, was a husband she had not heard from since 1943. She had mastered the art of survival. Keep your face blank, obey orders, endure. The British marched them to a makeshift staging ground where hundreds of German prisoners, most of them men, a few women, sat on the dirt under watchful rifles. Hollow-eyed soldiers in torn Wehrmacht and Kriegsmarine uniforms stared blankly at nothing. The women instinctively clustered together, a small patch of gray and white amid a sea of faded green and black. To their surprise, British canteens offered water. No one cursed them. No one lifted a hand in violence. The sergeant who had found them in the bunker even handed out cigarettes to the men, and after a moment's pause, to the women as well. Greta refused. Anna accepted one, but could not bring herself to light it. They spent 2 nights like this, sleeping on bare earth under British ground sheets, spooning tin-tasting stew from battered mess tins. The British soldiers remained brisk, distant, yet not cruel. And that alone rattled them more than threats ever could. Where was the vengeance they had been warned about? Where was the promised brutality? On the second night, Ilse whispered into Greta's ear, dread curling each word. Maybe it comes later, when they take us to England. The transport began on the 3rd morning. They were loaded into trucks and driven north to Cuxhaven. A harsh North Sea wind battered the docks, shrieking past the ruins of the harbor while gulls screamed overhead, as though the sky itself was bearing witness. At the dock, a British transport ship awaited them. Not a sleek warship bristling with guns, but a converted cargo vessel, its hold refitted with hard wooden benches bolted to the floor. The separation came swiftly, women to one side, men to the other. Greta and the others were guided below deck into a cramped compartment thick with the smells of diesel fumes and damp wool. Around 40 women crowded into that space, nurses, auxiliary personnel, clerks, a few Luftwaffe Helferinnen who had once aimed searchlights and tracked aircraft in the dark. Most were barely adults. A few bore the lines of middle age. Silence wrapped around them like a shroud, a collective pause of dread and exhaustion. The voyage to England lasted 12 long hours. The sea heaved beneath them, tossing the ship like a toy. Buckets clanked as several women retched miserably into them. Greta curled into herself, arms locked around her knees, listening to the groan of the hull and the relentless heartbeat of the engines. Her mind wandered where she feared it would, to Hamburg, to her mother, if she still lived, if their home still stood, to the stories whispered in fear, prison camps, forced labor, hunger, humiliation, to that moment in the bunker when she had been certain her life had already ended. At dawn on the 11th of May, 1945, the ship slid into Tilbury. A gray sky draped over the harbor. Cranes swung slowly like giants waking late, and lorries growled across the quay. Dock workers shouted in English, a chaotic chorus of a world that had not fallen apart. The women were shepherded down the gangway onto concrete slick with sea spray. British soldiers, most clearly too young or too old for the front, observed them not with menace but with a sort of mild curiosity. When Marguerite slipped on the wetboards, a gray-haired corporal instinctively held out a hand. She stared at it, suspicious, then accepted the help, surprised by her own motion. A warehouse had been turned into a processing center. Paperwork, flashbulbs, the clinical choreography of bureaucracy. British nurses in crisp uniforms lifted arms, checked pulses, scribbled notes. Ilse caught fragments of their chatter. Undernourished. Lice. Watch that one. Looks like trench foot. No harsh touches, no hungry eyes. When one German woman fainted under the stress of it, a British doctor gently lowered her to a cot, murmuring for water as if she were a patient, not a prisoner. Then came the train, and shock. Not locked cattle wagons, but passenger coaches with padded seats and windows that slid open to let in fresh air. The women sat wordless as the view swept by. Rolling green fields, tidy hedgerows, peaceful villages untouched by flame or rubble. Sheep grazed lazily on hillsides as though war was a nightmare told far away. Greta leaned against the glass, grief tightening inside her like a fist. This was the enemy? This land they had been told was barbaric? How could it look so safe, so whole? Anna broke the silence with a whisper barely louder than a breath. Why isn't it destroyed? No one dared to answer. The train pushed north and west, through towns with names they couldn't decipher. At small stations, British civilians paused to regard the passing carriages, some curious, some indifferent. At one stop, an Englishwoman on the platform locked eyes with Marguerite through the glass. They studied one another for several seconds. Two women separated by a war and a window pane. Then the Englishwoman gave a small nod, not kindness, not contempt, simply acknowledgement, and turned away. They reached their destination by late afternoon. Countryside, wide, green, quiet, Shropshire. Near a village they would later learn was called Church Stretton. Their new world was a former military training camp. Rows of corrugated Nissen huts behind a wire fence. The fence spoke plainly. This was a prison, yet the gate was manned by a single elderly soldier who barely glanced at them as he waved them through. Soon they stood in the assembly hall, facing the commandant. Major Thompson, tall, ramrod straight, spoke through a translator. The officer interpreting his words was a German-speaking Briton with a faint Bavarian lilt. That accent made several of the women exchange quiet looks. Was he a refugee? Someone who had fled the Reich long before the walls fell in? You are prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. You will be treated in accordance with international law. You will be assigned work duties. You will receive rations, medical care, and mail privileges. Escape attempts will be punished. Cooperation will be rewarded. That is all. Those words, translated carefully into German, echoed through the assembly hall. Then the women were led to their assigned quarters. Long Nissen huts lined with iron cots, thin mattresses and coarse gray blankets. Spartan, yes, but startlingly clean. Actual glass in the windows, a roof that didn't leak, a washroom with cold running water and a latrine that flushed. After a bunker filled with smoke and fear, after the stomach-turning ship, after the endless train ride, this felt absurdly close to comfort, and that alone terrified them. Surely this was just the calm before cruelty, a trick, a mask. That night, Greta lay rigid on her cot, eyes fixed on the curved metal ceiling above. Around her, the breathing of 40 uneasy women rose and fell. She waited, for boots, for shouting, for the blow that would prove the warnings true. But the night remained quiet. No knock, no rage, nothing. The turning point, the moment the world shifted, arrived not with violence, but with breakfast. On the third morning, the women marched to a wide wooden mess hall, smelling of coal smoke and boiled cabbage. Tin plates in hand, they braced for thin gruel and stale crusts, the diet of the defeated. Instead, ladles poured thick, hot porridge into their bowls. A spoonful of sugar on top, a slice of bread spread with margarine, and jam. Jam so dark and sticky it glistened like jewels. And mugs of strong tea, bitter, yes, but softened by milk. Greta stared down at her plate as if it were an illusion. More food than she had eaten in one sitting in months. More than many Germans had tasted in years. She carried the meal to a table and sat frozen. Around her, others mirrored the same disbelief. Could kindness itself be a trap? Ilse's spoon rose first. A taste, just one. And her eyes filled instantly. Tears spilled, unstoppable. Not from sorrow, from the shock of sweetness. From the dawning, overwhelming realization that she would not starve, would not be kicked or violated or raised. The nightmare she had prepared for was not coming. She covered her face with both hands and sobbed. Soon the room was full of quiet weeping. Anna, Marguerite, women whose names Greta didn't yet know, all crying over porridge and jam and the impossible relief of being fed like human beings. A young British guard, a woman in khaki, a member of the Auxiliary Territorial Service, lingered in the doorway, uncertain, sympathetic. She murmured something in English, then retreated, as if the emotion in the room was too heavy to bear. Greta forced herself to eat slowly, deliberately. Each warm bite, each sweet taste, chipped away at the fortress she had built inside. The belief hammered into them for years that the enemy was monstrous, merciless, less than human. But these people, these British, were giving her nourishment, warmth, dignity. The propaganda had lied, or at least had carved truth into something grotesque. Greta finished her meal, the empty plate resting in her lap like evidence, and a startling thought crept into her mind. What else had they lied about? Life in the camp soon formed a rhythm, a new language learned through routine. Reveille at 6, roll call at 7, breakfast at 8, work at 9. The tasks were real but not cruel. Laundering uniforms in a steamy wash house, peeling potatoes in the kitchen, stitching torn clothing in a workroom filled with treadle machines and the comforting hum of thread and oil. Women who had handled farm tools before the war were sent out into the countryside under armed escort, bussed to English farms in the crisp morning air, returning each night tired but intact. They harvested potatoes, turnips, cabbages under bright English skies, working beside land girls, elderly farmers, and occasionally Italian POWs from another camp who tipped their caps and cracked clumsy jokes in whatever English they possessed. And always food. Still rationed, Britain carried its own scars from 6 years of war, but enough. Porridge and bread at dawn, stew or pie at midday, potatoes and vegetables in the evening. Once a week, meat, corned beef or mutton, and once hilariously decadent tinned spam from America. Salty, fatty, oddly nostalgic. It tasted like home, and she couldn't explain why. Tea arrived 3 times a day. Sugar existed, scarcely, but existed. Milk came from a tin, but it whitened the world all the same. And every Thursday, chocolate. Small squares of Cadbury's, wrapped in purple foil. The quartermaster sergeant handed them out as if conducting a sacred ritual. Greta kept her first ration for 2 full days before daring to taste it. She waited until lights out before daring to unwrap it. In the darkness of the barracks, the foil crinkled softly between her fingers, a fragile luxury. She placed the tiny square on her tongue and closed her eyes as it slowly melted into sweet warmth. For a moment, she was no longer in a British prison camp. She was home, and she was not alone. She saw her brother, the one who had adored chocolate, laughing in the sun before Stalingrad swallowed him in 1942. She had not cried when he died. There had been no tears left then. But now, with British chocolate dissolving on her tongue, grief broke through at last. Fierce, aching, human. Maybe sorrow had simply been waiting for safety to surface. Medical care arrived twice a week with Captain Morris, a British doctor with a calm voice and gentle hands, who held sick call in a former office converted into a clinic. He examined the German women with the same professional briskness he would have shown his own soldiers. Thermometers, stethoscopes, bandages, notes written neatly into his ledger. Ilse, with her nursing background, was soon assigned as his assistant. Every afternoon she handed him instruments, translated symptoms, and learned the foreign medical language bit by bit. Fever, infection, penicillin. Penicillin fascinated her, the miracle drug she had heard about but never seen. A wonder that Germany, strangled by shortages, had been unable to use. Soldiers there died of infections that here were cured with a single injection, almost casually. One afternoon, while they worked side by side, Captain Morris paused and asked in carefully formed German, "You are a nurse, yes? Where did you train?" "Stuttgart," Ilse replied, "a Protestant hospital, before the war." He nodded thoughtfully. "Good training. We could use more nurses. After you are repatriated, perhaps you will continue." Repatriated. The word struck her like a bell, ringing with possibilities she hadn't dared imagine. A future? A return? A Germany still alive somewhere beyond the ruins? "If there is a Germany to return to," she murmured. Captain Morris stopped sorting instruments, meeting her eyes with solemn certainty. "There will be," he said. "It will be different, but it will be." Anna Kessler found refuge in the camp's small library, a Nissen hut lined with donated books, rows of mysteries, battered novels, outdated encyclopedias, even a few forgotten poetry collections. Her task: organize, catalog, stamp the inside covers with the camp's name. Quiet work, solitary work, perfect for disappearing into pages where war did not exist. One afternoon, she discovered a slim volume of Goethe, pre-war Berlin print, clearly once owned by someone who had cared about German words. She knelt between the shelves and opened it, finding the familiar lines. "Über allen Gipfeln ist Ruhe. Over all the hills is peace." She read the poem once, then again, until her hands trembled with the sheer absurdity of the moment. A German girl, a prisoner, reading German poetry in an English POW camp, finding comfort in words born a century before the madness. That evening, she wrote in her diary, the small notebook provided by the British. "They give us books. They give us food. They give us time to think. I don't understand. I thought the enemy would destroy us. Instead, they are making us human again." What does that mean? What does it say about us? About them? Meanwhile, Marguerite Scholl worked in the laundry, a sweltering room thick with steam and the sting of bleach. The labor was heavy and constant, hauling soaked sheets, cranking them through wringers, hanging them to dry. But it was familiar, and familiarity was a lifeline. She worked beside 3 other German women and 2 British civilians. Older village women, cautious and polite, but not warm. At first, conversation was limited to necessary words exchanged with wary distance. But the days accumulated. A shared laugh at a stubborn stain, a cup of hot tea during a break, a moment when Marguerite helped one of the English women lift a heavy basket, and the woman smiled. Tar, love. That simple word, love, pierced something deep within her. Not affection, not friendship, not yet. Merely the casual tenderness of British working-class speech. But to Marguerite, it was a fissure in the wall that defined her as an enemy. A reminder. She was not a monster, not a threat. Just another tired woman trying to endure. And one afternoon, the memory looping back, Ilse again stood beside Captain Morris in the clinic when he repeated his gentle question, as if reaffirming its promise. "You are a nurse, yes. Where did you train?" And hope, cautious and trembling, flickered alive anew. Marguerite hesitated, then spoke the word that still felt dangerous. Fragile. a husband. Mrs. Davis, the British laundry worker, nodded slowly. My son. They folded the sheet together in silence. Nothing more needed saying. Grief recognized itself wherever it lived. Loss was loss. The war had stolen from them both. After that day, Mrs. Davis always made sure Marguerite received an extra cup of tea during breaks, a tiny act of solidarity or mercy, or perhaps simply acknowledgement. And so the shift continued, not with a single moment, but gradually, like water wearing away stone. A drip of contradictions eroding old certainties. The propaganda had insisted the British were barbarians, ruthless and seething with revenge. But the guards were mostly bored, weary men, joking over card games, longing for discharge, dreaming of home. The propaganda had claimed Britain was starving, collapsing. Yet the countryside beyond the wire was lush and living. Fields unscarred, villages intact, civilians pushing forward with tired resilience that looked nothing like ruin. And the propaganda had declared that Germans were the master race, destined to rule, superior in all ways. Yet here they were, defeated, dependent, their survival resting on the generosity of those they had been told were subhuman. And those supposed inferiors were treating them better than their own authorities had in the final starving years of the Reich. Greta wrote in her diary, "We were told so many things. We believed them because everyone believed them, because doubting was dangerous, because it was easier to accept than to question. But now I see what I was never allowed to see. The enemy is just people, tired, ordinary people who want the war to be over as much as we do. What does that make us? What does that make everything we did?" The questions lingered, unanswered. In August, the camp held a small concert, the idea of one of the German prisoners, once a music teacher. Major Thompson approved it, though instruments were almost non-existent. A battered piano in the assembly hall, and a few harmonicas that had mysteriously found their way into camp. But they had voices. They sang soft German folk songs, Die Gedanken sind frei, kein schöner Land, carefully avoiding anything martial, anything with the shadow of the regime. And to their astonishment, Major Thompson and several guards attended, sitting quietly in the back, listening without comment. When the final notes faded, Major Thompson stood. Through the translator, he said simply, "Thank you, that was lovely. Music is one of the few things that survives war intact." Then he left, boots echoing on the floorboards. Greta remained seated as the twilight pooled through the windows, and something deep inside her shifted again. These British, these people whose cities had burned under German bombs, whose children had died in shelters, sat and listened to German songs and called them lovely. What kind of enemy did that? Not an enemy, she realized. Not anymore. Just people, on the far side of a wall that was already crumbling. Christmas 1945 marked the true turning point. Paper chains strung along the mess hall, a small fir tree donated by a local farmer, trimmed with scraps of ribbon, a holiday meal, roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and a tinned pudding drowned in custard, the finest feast they had tasted in years. And then Major Thompson appeared with a crate of small gifts collected from villagers, scarves, gloves, writing paper, bars of soap. He handed each parcel out himself, offering a formal Frohe Weihnachten in his careful German. Anna received a pale blue wool scarf, slightly worn, but soft and clean. She touched it, and the confusion of kindness became too much. Tears spilled before she could stop them. A young ATS guard, Patricia, crouched beside her and murmured in English, "It's all right, love. It's over now. You're safe." Anna couldn't understand the words, but the tone, the gentleness, she understood perfectly. She clutched the scarf and cried until nothing was left. That night, the women gathered in the barracks, seated in a circle, the little Christmas tree's scent still clinging to their clothes. They spoke of home, of families, of the uncertainty of repatriation. Tentatively, they spoke of truths they had been afraid to admit. Ilse said, "We were lied to, about everything." Margaret said, "Not everything, but enough." Greta whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore, and that more than anything, was the most frightening discovery of all. "I don't know what I believe," Greta whispered. "What was real? What was only fear?" The words hung in the air. No one answered. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Soft, silent, settling over the camp, over the fields, over all of Britain in a peaceful white shroud. Inside the barracks, they were warm. They had eaten well. They were alive. And somehow that, being safe, being shown compassion, felt like the most radical act imaginable. Repatriation began in early 1946. The process was mechanical, impersonal, names checked, papers stamped, prisoners sorted into groups, and sent by train and ship back to a Germany that no longer existed in any recognizable form. The Reich was gone. The cities had become skeletons of stone. The nation was carved into zones, limping into survival. Many women returned to find only ash and twisted metal where homes had stood. Families dead or dispersed. They came back carrying a strange truth, that a prison camp in England had sheltered them with more dignity than their own collapsing government ever had. Greta returned to Hamburg and found her mother clinging to life in the cellar, beneath what had once been their house. Greta told her about the food, the gentleness, the unexpected humanity. Her mother listened, then said softly, "The British are good people. We were told lies." It was the closest she would ever come to repentance. Ilse found a position in a hospital in Stuttgart, her hands guided now by the knowledge Captain Morris had shared so patiently. They exchanged letters for years, messages crossing the channel, filled with discussions of treatments and now and then, the war. In one letter he wrote, "We were all victims of ideology. Some of us simply ended up on the winning side." Anna returned to her village and became a school teacher, like her father before her. She never spoke publicly about her years as a POW, yet she kept the pale blue scarf folded in a drawer. Later, when her daughter asked where it had come from, Anna answered, "It was a gift from the enemy. It taught me that enemy is only a word." Margaret never learned what became of her husband. She assumed he'd perished on the Eastern Front, lost to the same voracious void that had swallowed so many others. In 1950, she married again, to a quiet man who worked in a factory and never pressed her for stories she could not bear to revisit. But she never forgot Mrs. Davis, the British woman in the laundry who had recognized her grief and matched it with her own. In the grand chronicles of the Second World War, the story of German POWs in Britain is barely a footnote, a small chapter overshadowed by the vastness of destruction and consequence. Yet for those women, it was nothing less than a revelation. They had been raised on absolutes, masters and inferiors, conquerors and conquered, us and them. But in the camps of Shropshire, Yorkshire, and Somerset, they learned something far more unsettling and far more human, that the world was never so simple, that kindness could exist even across a barbed wire, that mercy could be chosen over vengeance, even when vengeance was deserved. They learned in the end that sometimes the dreaded knock at the door, the moment when the enemy arrives, can lead not to annihilation, but to transformation. That hard lesson, bought with 6 years of nightmare, may have been the only piece of good salvage from the madness.